Here's a 2010 Scion. They don't make them anymore, you know. What's up with that? Why did Toyota stop making them? He said at 3 years, all he's done is change the oil. He had to change the valve cover gasket once, minor deal, right? Runs fine, gets phenomenal gas mileage. It starts fine hot. But if you say get on the highway, go eat lunch for an hour, then it's got to crank a few times before it starts, but then it starts up and runs normal. Since we got to wait an hour for it to sit here, because he drove 70 miles to get here, we're going to show you everything about the car, analyze it, and then we'll try to figure out why it's starting weird only when it's hot and sat for an hour or so. The whole brand Scion, as far as I'm concerned, was just a stupid idea of Toyota. This one was made in 08, made in Japan. The paint's still good. The interior's still in decent shape. Even the plastic on the bumper's still shiny. And yeah, it's an econo-box car, so it has hubcaps. Who cares? They look okay. Now, Toyota made Scions because they thought, let's sell cars to young people. I remember when it started, when I was in Houston, and they do things like they went to music stores. Yeah, you probably don't even know what a music store is anymore because everybody does everything online. They sold CDs and stuff in those days, right? And they'd have bands playing, and they'd have Scions there, and the Toyota employees would drive the young people around, try to get them to buy them. So they came up, oh, Scion, a new brand. Well, one, what a stupid idea. Toyota makes good cars. They had a good name. I understand why a Jeep Renegade is called a Jeep Renegade. It's really a rebadged four-wheel drive Fiat, but calling it Jeep Renegade, it's got that Jeep mystique, and fools buy it thinking they're getting a Jeep, and then they find out later they actually bought themselves a Fiat, which is a pile of junk. Toyotas were good. Why they decided to come up with a different name is beyond me. Then they gave up and went back to just calling them Toyotas again. So don't worry if you buy a used one. Well, they don't make them. I can't get parts. They're Toyotas. You can get parts of the stupid things. Now, there's one problem that a lot of Scions had, and that was some of them were oil burners. Now, this one doesn't burn any oil. As we look under the hood, I'll show you why. It's got a 4-cylinder engine, and we'll take the stupid beauty cover off. Who cares about that? And it is, as we can see right here, 1.8. It's a 1.8 liter 4-cylinder engine. Toyota makes phenomenal 1.8 liter engines. My Matrix has a 1.8. My Celica has a 1.8. And my original Toyota was a 1981 Toyota Corolla SR5. It had a 1.8 liter engine, and they all ran forever and didn't burn any oil. This Scion behind me, it's got a 2.4 liter 4-cylinder engine. It burns oil like mad. Smoke just comes flying out of it. Your finger in the tailpipe. Slimy black burnt oil. Stick your hand in this tailpipe. Just a tiny bit of dirt. I mean, it's not black. You always get a little bit of soot, but there's no slimy oil in there. Now, that was a mistake Toyota made. They didn't make the piston rings and the engines right, and they burn oil. The problem was Americans whine. 1.8 liters isn't big enough for us. I know, it's big enough for me. They all lasted forever. What do I care? Realize 95% or so of Americans only drive automatic transmissions. Scion XD, as you can see, is a standard transmission, a manual transmission. You shift it yourself. Got 5 speeds. It gets up, it goes. It doesn't burn oil. It runs fine. If you do pair this with an automatic transmission, yes, it's relatively slow, even though it's a smaller car. And so right off the bat, you'd understand, well, if 95% of Americans drive automatics, there goes their market down the toilet for this car, because hardly any Americans drive standards anymore. But they can run perfectly fine. And the ones with automatics, they run perfectly fine too. They're not race cars. They went to a bigger engine and they made a mistake. It's a smaller engine. It can run forever. You really don't have to worry as long as you change your oil. He bought it used. He's put on 30,000 miles. It still doesn't burn oil. They're generally pretty bulletproof engines. But buying a used Scion, instead of 1.8, if it says 2.5, my advice is don't buy it unless, now Toyota did replace a lot of the engines. If they have a certificate from Toyota that said they did the engine over, it could still be a decent vehicle. When they put the right pistons and piston rings in, they didn't burn oil and they ran perfectly fine. That's one thing that you want to watch out for these. Now, smaller engines get better gas mileage. He gets 37 in this. And for some oddball reason, I got about 37 coming back to Tennessee from Rhode Island last time, even though the thing's only rated at like 32. Who knows? The world's insane. But they get good gas mileage. They don't burn oil. And they can last a long time. And even though it's a somewhat older car, talking about 13, 14 years old, almost everything on it's original. It's got the original alternator, air conditioning compressor, motor mounts. Almost everything on this thing is pretty much original. I mean, that's how well made these things are. Now we'll go inside, and these were basically Econobox cars. There's no arguing it. There's no gigantic frills in these things. Everything works. Everything's easy to get to, AC, and it does have, you can change the music on the steering wheel, that's it. But, hey, I mean, you start it up, they start up. We're not going to start it yet because we don't want to start it. We want to see why it doesn't start when it sits for an hour. And it's got faux carbon fiber, you know, that's plastic, right? But, all in all, with the seats back, you got all kinds of carrying room. These are very handy little cars. Hey, it's not as basic as you might think. Although, it is pretty basic here. There's no armrest unless you have the longest arms in the history of mankind. Now, we're going to road test it later, but now I'm going to look at data. Starts fine cold. Starts fine hot. But the stupid thing is hard to start when it sits for about an hour after driving it a while. If it sits for a few hours, it starts right up. So we got a very limited range of when it doesn't start. Check this out. I really like the speedometer. It's got the speedometer and then the tachometer's on the side. It's all one place, right in front of where you're looking. Pretty good design. Granted, a tachometer on a modern car, most are automatics, is a joke. What do you really need it for? But this is the standard. Now here we go. It's figured out that it's a Scion XD. Engine's normal, ABS is normal. There's nothing oddball with it, which is no surprise. Not it's any bad data as it stands now, but you can really only check it when it's running. We don't want to start it yet, so let's check a few other things. We know he hasn't done anything for 3 years. Just look at the spark plugs for kicks. Oh, we'll pull it out. See what it looks like. Who knows? Might even be the original ones. We don't know. And yes, indeed, what do we have? The original spark plugs. So we're going to change them. Now, it came with iridium plugs, so we're putting iridium plugs back in. And here's a debate that you need to understand. A lot of people say, oh, you can put anti-seize. You don't put anti-seize on any of these modern ones because you can see they are already plated. And if you put lubricant on this, they can get loose. So you just want to put them in the way they are, these iridium runs. They're already plated. You don't do anything but put them in dry. Tighten them up by hand. Then put a ratchet on. Then you get them the rest of the way. Now it's tight. So what you do is go about another 20, 30 degrees, and that's good. Then it's nice and tight. You can use a torque wrench if you want, but you really don't need to. Remember to do all four. We're going to analyze them too, see if any cylinders are more worn than others by the color of the plug. Look at this one. It's the same as the other one. Got a little discoloration. That's normal. You can see it's just kind of like pinky little dots on it. That's from fuel additives. At some point in time, somebody had some kind of additive in a gasoline he bought, and they'll get little dotty stuff like that. This is nothing outrageous. I mean, if you put new plugs in there immediately like that, yeah, I'd buy my gas somewhere else. But these are the original plugs, and they've been in there for 14 years, so you're going to get oddball things that have burnt over time. So far, they both look the same. We'll do the other two. So let's see if we killed two birds with one stone. Let's see if it starts up now after an hour or so. We'll see what happens there. Push on the clutch because it's a standard. And starts right up. Realize even Toyotas need spark plugs every once in a while. These were like 15-year-old spark plugs, so yeah, not that big of a deal. Change every once in a while. Now we can look at the data and see what's happening. Battery voltages 13.69, that's fine. No misfires, they're all off. Go through everything. Everything's blue and normal. 10 degrees timing, that's stable. MAF sensor stable. Current fuel trim, it's running a little lean, but not that much. 0.78, that's almost perfect. That's perfect as 0, so it's pretty good. And everything else is blue and is within specs for sure. Now maybe a little car, but you don't feel like you're dragging in the ground in this thing. It is an XB after all. It's a relatively boxy, somewhat high vehicle. And if you keep it in gear lower, it's a zippy thing to drive around in. Just here, I'm not really slowing down that much to take these corners. You don't hear the tires squealing. They're not squealing. It's just a pretty well-designed little zippy box. And of course, it's a light car. The brakes work perfectly fine. No sound coming out of them. You can drive it as fast or slow as you want. And really, it handles the twisties quite well. Didn't have any problem cornering. You're not squealing tires. Now, of course, it's not a race car. You know, it's a Scion XD with a 1.8 liter engine. But here, we'll see what it can do. It can burn rubber because it doesn't have traction control. Yeah, it's not as slow as you might think. It gets going. Like I said, I love having the tach and a speedometer together like that. It makes them so easy to read. But really, I didn't expect it to burn rubber like that. That's a 1.8, but Toyota knows how to make 1.8s with a standard transmission. Hey, it's got a little zip to it. Sure, it doesn't ride like my wife's Lexus, but it's a Scion. It's an Econobox car. It handles fine. You get somewhat of a bumpy ride. That's how they are. It's a small wheelbase vehicle. An Econobox thing. It doesn't have really smooth absorbing systems, but it holds the road and it's fun to drive. Truthfully, the shape that's in it, knowing that it's a Toyota made in Japan, I wouldn't think anything about driving around the world in this thing if there was enough road to get there. Geared correctly, cause look, we're going 60 miles an hour and it's only going about 2,600 RPMs. That's how it gets phenomenal gas mileage. So there we have it, a fun little car. It gets phenomenal gas mileage. Yeah, it's got a rough ride. So does my wife's Matrix. Hey, they're small cars, but they get phenomenal gas mileage. And in this case, it started weird when it was hot soaked for an hour. Now it doesn't, just because it had the original spark plugs. They wore out. You can find one of these. My advice, snap it up. Just be leery of the ones they got that 2.5 liter 4-cylinder engine. They're often oil burners. I wouldn't buy one of those, but these 1.8s, they can run forever. Ford Rangers. People are always looking for pickup trucks. This one was just picked up for $3,000. Let's see if you got a good deal. We'll analyze the whole thing about Ford Rangers. Okay, it's got 200,000 miles on it, but here is the gigantic but. See those lights? This was an oversized vehicle. It's warning people, here comes the oversized vehicle. What do those things do? They're on the highway going 65 miles an hour. That is 10% of stop and go city wear. If this thing had 200,000 miles and it was in city stop and go, it would be falling apart. But with highway mileage, that's another story. We're gonna go through the whole truck, but you can see it's an XLT, it's got a nice cap, and it is a 4x4. Now $3,000 for a 4-wheel drive pickup is chicken change these days, so we're gonna analyze this whole thing and see what kind of a deal he got. It looks okay from here, but I mean, we gotta check it all out. Now first, under the hood, this thing has the V6 engine. Now this is the 3-liter V6 engine. They've been around quite some time. Like I said, regular injectors, no turbo, lots of working space. Unlike the modern ones when you can't get to anything, these are easy to work on. 200,000 miles, the engine doesn't burn any oil. Again, like I say, this was a chase vehicle, so it was all highway mileage. The engine still doesn't burn any oil, and it's got plenty enough power for pulling around. He's using it as a farm vehicle. He got it for a knockaround one. He's got a later model F-150 that he uses every day, 2020. And for $3,000, this deal's looking better and better. And strange enough for a Ford, hey, the AC still works. It's an 08, made in the United States, #1. Wasn't made in Mexico. Now it is 4-wheel drive. And he does say, when you're going low sometimes you get a little clunkage. Well, let me tell you, Fords are like that. I've gotten brand new ones with 800 miles on them, and if you do rack-to-rack turn with 4-wheel drive on it, you hear noises and it feels weird. That's just Fords. We'll check it out more when we road test it. But you gotta expect that in a Ford. They always had somewhat clunky 4-wheel drive at low speeds. They work fine going around, but you do rack-to-rack turning, you're gonna hear noise in a Ford. So we're gonna get our scan tool out. Before we do, yeah, the seat's worn out, but what the heck, you can put a cover on if you want. It's a nice little pickup truck. And for those of you who don't know what these are called hand crank windows. You crank them to get the windows up and down. It's a serious work truck, as you can see. He's even got work drawers in here. He's using it as a nice little work truck. Build himself a little boxer, and that keeps the rain off of it. It's a pretty good idea. So we get the scan tool going here. Plug it in, easy enough plug to get to, and we'll start analyzing. Now, these Rangers can be decent pickup trucks for the money. Today, of course, they can't compete with the Toyota Tacoma with its world-beating 600,000 miles with very little trouble-free driving, hardly any repairs. But hey, you're never going to get a Toyota Tacoma for $3,000 4-wheel drive like this. You're just not going to. That's one of the reasons people buy Rangers. They don't want a big giant F-150. They'll buy a Ranger used and get a pretty good deal. 3-liter automatic gasoline, federal emissions. So we're going to go to analytics. So it's scanning. You can see it is a compact pickup truck. The back end's here. But hey, passenger seat's still in good shape. Obviously, it's been driven a bunch by a driver with nobody else in it. Now it's 100% done, and we got a few problems, nothing outrageous there. Let's kind of go through them. Start with the PCM. Cylinder number 4 misfire, and misfire detected on startup. So it's got a little bit of a misfire, and it's got a code for the restraint control module. It's this old. Usually the airbag systems don't work all that great. Restraint system, airbag fault. We know it was an airbag fault. So the seatbelts still work pretty good. We're going to take it for a road test. So we'll erase the old code. See what happens after the road test. This one is the General Electric module. It's got one fault. See what that is. Tire pressure sensor fault. Well, that makes sense because when we look, you can see there's a tire pressure monitor warning light. He's got a piece of black tape on it so he doesn't have to look at it. Start it up now, and we'll look at live data. We'll go to powertrain control module, look up live data, and here we go, we got live data. Let's start looking at it. Battery voltage good, 14.06, no fault in all these sensors. There's no misfires yet because I reset the misfire counter, so obviously it's a very minor problem. It shows you fuel tank pressure for the evap system, anti-pollution. All 6 injectors show no faults. As we look at fuel trim, not too bad for 200,000 miles. It's a short-term fuel trim on 1. It's subtracting a tiny bit of fuel, then adding a little bit of fuel. And for trim 2, it's subtracting a little, then adding a little. It's not that bad. That's small percentage on an old vehicle like this. Now, I can feel a misfire, so now we erase the code. So let's go back. I'm going to run the Ford Keon engine running code. So here we go. It's going to run the test itself while we're sitting here. I'm not touching anything. It's doing it itself. Press and release the brake pedal. Turn the steering wheel 1/2 turn and release. Cycle the overdrive switch. On, off, on, off. Now my computer's running the computer to the car. Like I say, I'm not doing anything. This is all being done by the computer testing it. See, the powertrain control module code came back, and it's for misfire cylinder number 4 again. So as we go on with the hood, that cylinder's got a little minor misfire to it. And as we go to the back, you can definitely hear it. Chunk, 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 chunk. Now in this case, here's a little Sherlock Holmes. He's already changed the spark plug wires and the spark plugs, and every once in a while, he gets a check engine light for cylinder number 4 misfire. Well, it only happens at lower speeds. Not on highway speeds. The computer shows there's no fault in the injector, so it's not an injector problem. He changed spark plug wires and spark plugs, so it's not that. But as you can see, this is number 4 in the front, right? Here's the EGR valve. It feeds the EGR gases right there by cylinder number 4. Now they don't do emissions testing here in Tennessee, so people really don't care. But if he wants to do an experiment, he could take the EGR valve off, plug up the hole, and if it stopped misfiring, you'd know it was the EGR system that was injecting too much exhaust gas. The wrong time when it's low causes it to misfire, because it doesn't misfire at higher speeds. Doesn't burn oil, so odds are it's just getting a little bit off. He's probably not going to do anything because it's a farm vehicle, but at least now he has a better idea why it's still misfiring, although he changed all those parts. Because my machine showed it's not the injectors, so there's no sense farting around with them, and it's just getting the cylinder 4 misfire. Every once in a while it turns the engine on, it turns it off. So I'm assuming it's the EGR system. It's actually got a little bit better just sitting here, so that's the only logical thing. The pinwheel's probably breaking down, seeping exhaust gas at idle, and then you get a little bit of a misfire. But it doesn't do it at highway speed. So now you learn a little bit more about how EGR systems can screw up old cars. I'll take it for a little road test. There's no backup camera in this whole thing. We'll have to use the mirrors. And it's a Ford. You can hear various creaks. We turn it, it'll probably creak like mad. There it goes. Creaking Ford. They always made noise. The thing is, it runs down the road. See, when you give it gas, there's no misfire then, so I'm really betting on the EGR valve is letting a little too much EGR gas in at idle, so it has that little misfire on the cylinder that's right next to where the valve is, number 4. 200,000 miles? Hey, still running pretty good. Typical Ford, you hear it, but it still goes down the road. 4-wheel drive, so you can hear a little more humming than the normal one, but it's nothing outrageous. None of the bearings are really worn out or anything. So let's put it in 4-wheel high and see how it goes. Now it's in a 4x4, tells you right here. It's going pretty good. Don't hear any really odd noises. You hear a little more humming because it's in 4-wheel drive high. Pretty good 4-wheel drive operation for for something with over 200,000 miles on it. And we're going to our little drag strip. So we'll come to a stop, put it back in two-wheel drive. All right, there's nobody behind us, so we will switch to two-wheel high. And on your mark, get set, go! Not a race truck, but it gets going fast enough. This is now a country work truck. It doesn't rattle all that much when you're going down the highway. Four-wheel low, and you're gonna hear, it will make some noise. They often do on these as they wear. Even when they're new, they make some noise. You can feel it, you can hear it. The four-wheel low is only for really low speeds, and it's not really made for turn-to-turn corners, so we'll put it back to normal. As you can see, the four-wheel drive's off. Now, you can have better acceleration. So in this case, it's a typical Ford. The four-wheel high works perfectly fine, but the four-wheel low does clunk a little. The Fords are just like that. It still works. It just clunks a little bit when you're in four-wheel low. But I've seen brand new Fords with 800 miles that clunk somewhat in four-wheel low. And like I say, you don't feel any misfire at all while you're driving down the road at any kind of speed. It's just at idle that gets that misfire. And it's probably because the EGR valve's messed up and sending EGR gas at idle when it's not supposed to. And since it's right next to cylinder number 4 on the intake, it will end up messing up the air-fuel ratio of cylinder number 4 and cause a misfire. Not a bad deal for $3,000. I'm sure it's a Ford. You're gonna hear creaks here and there when you're turning and driving, but hey, it's still going down the road. Not really all that creaky now after it's warmed up. So there we have it, a $3,000 Ranger four-wheel drive. Runs perfectly fine other than a minor misfire at idle. And like I said, this is Tennessee. We don't do emissions testing, so people really don't care. He might fool around with plugging it up just for kicks to see if it'll stop it, but doesn't burn oil, runs perfectly fine, has those cool lights on it. You find something like this that's been a chase vehicle, that's spent a lot of time on the highway, this thing's still got tons of life left in it. And for $3,000, hey, you got one heck of a deal. It's a Harley Davidson 2003, and he got it with like 5,000 something miles on it. Is it possible? Yes, it is. I'm going to tell you how. Now, if you remember my Yamaha story, it sat for a long time. Nobody wanted to buy it. Everybody here in Rhode Island wants to have a Harley Davidson. And so I got this dirt cheap. Well, I can't believe my eyes when he showed up with this Harley. He just bought it for $2,000. And it's got 5,000 miles on it. How did that happen? One, this is a Sportster 883. I'm a bike rider myself. I like these a lot better because they're more fun. They don't weigh as much. They're a real motorcyclist motorcycle. They're not a poser. They're not somebody, which I always find humorous myself, who's on a big old Harley with saddlebags, and they're driving like turtles, right? And the people in SUVs and minivans are zooming by them in the highway, right? When I was young, they were going by everybody, driving like maniacs. Now, people are passing Harley drivers in minivans and SUVs. So, it's a completely different ball game with the big Harleys. But these are actually a lot more fun to drive. Now, granted, he found this thing in a barn. The guy says, what doesn't run? Didn't have any gas in it, had a dead battery. He went with his Frontier, threw it in, took it home, went to AutoZone, bought a battery, got a jug of gasoline, put it in, pushed the button, and voila, it started up. Now, you might think, well, he was really lucky. No, these are air-cooled motorcycles. Air-cooled engines can sit a really long time. I had British motorcycles that sat for 15 years, and I do the same thing. I throw a battery in, put some gas in. Of course, they were really old. They had ticklers on them. Each carburetor had a little tickler. You pushed it until gas came on your fingers, kind of made your fingers smelly. Then you'd kick the thing over and away it went. Air-cooled motors, they can sit a long time. The water-cooled ones, a lot of times antifreeze is bad, corrodes, locks up the piston rings. Air-cooled motorcycles aren't really that way. Granted, it had the original tires, so you're talking about 19-year-old tires. So the first thing he did was put new tires on it, front and back. And that's a smart thing because, one, it's a motorcycle. You got two wheels. Car, you got four. One goes bad, you can still pretty well handle, get out of the way. You lose a tire on these, it's goodbye, Charlie. And two 20-year-old motorcycle tires. You know, they're dry rotted. They could explode at any moment when you're going fast down the road. But even more important, three, these are new tires. nice and pliable, right? That keeps them on the road. The original tires that were still on it had plenty of tread, but they were rock hard. You know what that does? They slide. You slam on the brakes, you slide. You try to accelerate, the rear tire will slide and the whole motorcycle will fall over. Don't mess with motorcycles and crappy tires. You want good tires. You see cracks, get them. You know they're 20 years old, get new tires. Don't take a chance with your life on tires. Believe me, I've been on motorcycles that got flat tires and it scared the heck out of me. So every time before I ride, I get on a tire gauge and I check the tire pressure. I don't care. I'll do it every time because I don't want to be stuck. And yeah, they only go a certain speed, right? This thing will go about 120 miles an hour. You take one of these 100 miles an hour, you're holding on, baby, let me tell you. Okay, so we'll start her up. Nothing sounds like a Harley. That's what sells them, the sound. They actually tried to patent the sound, but they lost in court. You can't patent the noise that a machine makes, but they tried. And this noise is one of the reasons that I predict, and you watch, I'm going to be right, that the Harley-Davidson live wire electric motorcycle is going to be one of the biggest failures of all time. Because one, they don't make any noise. They have a limited range too. You can keep putting gas in this thing. The electric Harleys have an extremely limited range. And what they did, they're always trying to pull fast economic moves at Harley. They're one of those companies that's always trying to buy back its own stock to artificially inflate the value and stuff. What they did was, a few months ago, they decided to split Harley-Davidson on one side and Livewire on the other. So they sold, as an initial public offering, $400 million of stock in Livewire, right? But between March and now, the people that bought it said, this stinks. They sold $375 million worth of the stock away. Harley-Davidson had to buy it themselves, it would have collapsed. So now Harley-Davidson owns 90% of Livewire, which was the company that they said they wanted to split apart. Well, it's not going to work. And you know why? Because these are an American icon. They have an iconic sound. They got the image. Electric versions, they don't make any noise, and if they make noise, it's fake noise. And they have a very limited range. The whole idea of a motorcycle is you get out on the highway. You're free. You can go wherever you want. You can ride into the sunset. Well, if you had an electric Harley, you'd be riding into the sunset, it'd run out of electricity, you'd be stuck on the side of the road. So this thing sat in a barn for almost 20 years, and it started right up. It's mainly because it's air-cooled. Smart. You can see as we go upside down, it's an AGM battery, and what does he do? He watches my videos, so he hooks a battery tender up and has no problems at all. He watches my video. It's the first motorcycle he's ever owned. Kind of interesting, because the first motorcycle I ever owned was a 650 Chop BSA Lightning. Now, it was the fastest production motorcycle in the world in 1966. It didn't even have 60 horsepower. Things are a lot faster today than they used to be. Now, this thing is 47.9 horsepower and 60-something pound-feet of torque. The V-twins have a lot of torque, right? They take off fast. And being that this is his first bike, this is the kind of bike you should get. Don't go out and buy some screaming 200 horsepower Japanese motorcycle. You're gonna kill yourself. That's too much power to handle. This thing's got plenty of oomph. It's a lot of fun. Like when I was a kid back in the day, I had a lot of fun on that BSA, and it went like stink. It's just like this. You get to about 120 and it just stopped. It wouldn't go any faster. But do you really need to go that fast anyways? It's a lot of fun driving these things around. Now, he brought it over to me from Massachusetts on Rhode Island. It's his first bike. It's the first time he took it on the highway. He said going 70 was just so cool, leaning forward a little. You feel the elements when you're going 70 miles an hour on a motorcycle. Believe me. And like I said, you hear this? So do the people you're driving on the road with. They'll notice you. They'll hear the rumbling. Imagine a silent motorcycle. It's bad enough that people say, I didn't see him on a motorcycle and I ran him over. Well, you can hear this. You cannot hear an electric motorcycle. They might not see you, then they won't hear you, and then no one will see you as it's all over. Quiet motorcycles are not a wise thing. He was just telling me about a friend of his that bought a fancy Charger for about 100 grand. He was going down the highway, the supercharger went and the whole engine went, pfft. Well, there's 100 grand and it broke. And here's two, and it's still going quite well. So really, it just goes to show. Everybody thinks the price of everything is so sky high. There's always something out somewhere if you spend a little time investigating. Now, like any motorcycle, you can polish all that out if you want. The rims are still in good shape, and the spokes, they all get like that. And you can get a little Dremel and polish them all up. It's not that hard to do. Being an 03, it's a 5-speed transmission. And he says he wished it had another gear because it's really screaming when you're going fast on the highway. But he's got a girlfriend. If she was riding on this thing when it was doing 80, she'd be back here screaming. But he said she hates it. She's not going to get near it. So, this is the, you know, cool cruising seat. It's got a big old monster one for the passenger. But the guy that sold it to him said, I don't ever want to see it with that big ugly seat on the back. And since his girlfriend hates it, that'll probably never happen. Unless he decides to trade it in on a really skinny girlfriend that'll fit on this tiny little thing. So here it is. I've been made a fool of. I thought, wow, I got this great Yamaha for $3 grand, right? He got this Harley for $2 grand in Massachusetts. Mind you, it wasn't in Rhode Island. As I said, the tires were old and all dried out. He went to a motorcycle shop, and here's the reason you don't want to go to a motor shop. They wanted over $1,000 to change the front and rear tires, mount them, put them on, right? And he said, ugh. He bought the tires himself. He paid $140 for the tires. He took them off. He said it was a pain, but he took them off. Then he took them to a tire shop. They charged him $80 to put it on and balance them. Saved himself a lot of money. Bike shops, most of them are total rip-offs. They just think, ah, what does this kid know? I'll just charge him whatever I can charge him. I'm a cheapskate. I put my own rims on. I know how to balance them, but really, hey, it only cost them $80 for their work, so that's what you do. Stay away from the motorcycle shops. They're just going to take you for a long ride. They wanted to charge him half of what he paid for the bike to put on 2 tires. It's just ridiculous. So there you have it. A $2,000 Harley Davidson that sounds like this. Now I feel embarrassed that I paid $3 grand for that Yamaha. Well, not really. My wife would never get on this thing, but I might be able to convince her on that if I tell her I won't go over 40 miles an hour when she's riding on the back. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.